I have a recent story about Antarctica. It doesn't disclose new information, but rather reinforces what is already known. I am an ex-army guy. Became good friends with a couple of guys during my tenure. I left after fulfilling my service, whereas my buddies stayed in the reserves. Several months ago, my buddies invited me to a shindig at the local VFW. This was in September. There was a dinner/dance honoring the old-timers. It was great to see all the old vets with their dates. There was a band made up of vets that played polkas and big band music. Guys were dancing and having a good time. The dinner/dance went from 5:30 to 7:30, and as it wrapped up, it started to rain. My buddies and I became valets and pulled up all the buicks for these old vets and helped them into their vehicles, as many were using canes or walkers. Soon the parking lot emptied, and we went back inside to help tear down the tables and stack chairs. The manager approached us, thanked us for helping out, and said we were free for the rest of the night. Now, the bar area of the VFW is always open on weekends, and stays open until the manager leaves, usually at around midnight or later. We grabbed some beers and headed out to the covered patio so my buddy and I could have a smoke. It was still raining outside, which gave a soothing sound as it hit the patio roof. There was one other guy sitting on a table over from us. Now, my buddies have been deployed all over the world: Iraq, Afghanistan, Germany, and Honduras. I always teased them about where they were going next. I mentioned Iran, Syria, back to Iraq, or Afghanistan, Antarctica. That's when the guy at the next table chimed in. His name was John. John worked in the kitchen of the VFW, and like my buddies, he served and then stayed in the reserves. He drilled in another city and was in some kind of special unit. Last year he spent 8 months deployed in Jordan, Kuwait, and Iraq with a team of 15 guys. Said they were doing surveillance for the CIA. John said he just returned from a 3-month deployment in Antarctica. Almonds activated. So naturally, I inquired about his deployment. Here is what I heard from him. John was one of 20 soldiers on this mission. He was deployed to Fort Benning for briefing and issued supplies. Flew from Atlanta to Honduras. There the rest of the 20-man team met up. Flew a large transport filled with supplies to Antarctica McMurdo Base. Now, the Antarctic Treaty states that no nation shall have a military base in Antarctica, only research stations, but military is allowed to deliver supplies and equipment. This is where it got interesting. John said when they arrived, he was surprised with the lack of snow. It was nighttime, and he could see snow in the distance, but there was none on the ground. He commented on the dirt, saying that it was very rocky and dark, unlike dirt in the Midwest. His team unloaded supplies off the cargo/transport, then loaded up into trucks and were taken around to the back of the base. There were tons of shipping containers sitting there in haphazard formation. They were led into one of the containers, and it was an office. That is where the military runs its operations from. They were led into another container and issued all new gear. Everything he was issued in Georgia was exchanged. Their outfits were all white, and they got special sunglasses to wear. They were then transported back to the runway and loaded onto 2 small planes. The flight out of McMurdo lasted close to 2 hours. It was night, and all that John could see out of the window was the blinking lights on the wing. They finally landed. The ground was all snow, not a speck of dirt, and it was very cold. An officer was waiting and led them in a bunker. It was a door in the side of a mound of snow. They walked into a large foyer with a door on the other side, and when the door closed behind them, the overhead vents turned on that blew warm air for a few seconds. When it stopped, they were led through the other door and then briefed. John learned this was a guard mission. They were divided into 4 teams of 5 and had to do 24-hour guard duty. That's 6 hours a team. The 5th man was a floater that stood in while you took a break. The CO asked which team will volunteer first. John's team volunteered. They were taken into another bunker while the rest of the unit went to the barracks. In the other bunker was the arsenal, and each man was issued both a rifle and pistol, which John thought was peculiar. 2 weapons for guard duty. The 5-man team went outside, and there were 2 half-tracks waiting. John loaded up, and off they went. The half-tracks were easily going 80+ miles per hour. It was getting light outside, and John saw they were headed towards the mountains. He said it was about a 40 to 45-minute drive. They arrived at this huge door, big enough for an airplane to fit through. It opened, and the guards came out to scan everyone's ID. John thought that was weird, how everything had to be scanned. Their vehicles moved inside, which was nothing but a huge hallway with another huge door at the other end. It was about 3 stories tall, and at least a football field long and wide. Again, as soon as the door closed, overhead blowers came on for a few seconds of warm air. There were 4 guard stations, 2 on each side of the large doors. Between doors against the wall was the break room with bathrooms, 3 vending machines, tables and chairs, and a new room with a couch in front of a TV that only had 1 station, some sort of news channel. The rest of John's story is uneventful. Guard duty for 3 hours. Then the floater would come, and he would go to the break room for an hour or so, and then go back. If he needed a bathroom break, there was a phone he could pick up that would connect to the floater in the break room. I asked John what vehicles came in and out. He said huge dump trucks, the ones with a retractable tarp cover, some off-road ATVs, and half-tracks. Every vehicle was white, even the dump trucks. Every time a vehicle approached, an alarm went off, and he had to put on his gloves and shades and head outdoor with his scanner to scan ID badges. I asked what was on the other side of the inner door. John couldn't see much, but said the hallway continued for a bit, then went down. When that door opened, they sometimes could hear a loud noise, like machinery. The barracks were plain and simple, divided into 3 spaces: bunk beds, bathrooms/showers, and rest area. The rest area had a ping pong table, couches, and a TV, which only played that 1 news channel. Pretty boring. John either slept, did exercise, or played ping pong. All food was brought to them, and the rest area had a little kitchen in the corner, and there were 3 vending machines. 3 months of boring guard duty. The return trip was the same as the arriving trip, just in reverse. McMurdo to Honduras, to Georgia, to home. John was paid well. His story doesn't shed new light into what's going on in Antarctica, but reaffirms that yes, there is a presence down there, and maybe some digging is taking place for whatever reason. I don't buy into all the spoopy stuff, but one thing I never understood is that no nation ever tried to take over. None. Sure, it's a hostile environment, and there's that 40s or whatever nation agreement to not claim it, but it's an entire continent with oil, gas, gold, coal, whatever other fossil fuels and precious metals that you can think of. Right now China is cornering the market on rare earth magnets because most of them come from lands that China controls. Are there any in Antarctica? How about helium? The supply is finite and running low. Most of it comes from the US. Is there any there? Maybe the USSR didn't want to claim it during the Cold War due to the US and vice versa. But China, why wouldn't they claim large tracts of it now? They're moving into Africa, giving large loans to nations they know can't pay them back, all so they can then take land and mineral rights. Why not just go to Antarctica and claim it? I watched one of those UFO disclosure vids. I forget which one, but it talked about an Antarctic base with UFOs flying in and out. Basically, there was a no-fly zone over an area, but someone got injured, and the military pilots decided that they weren't going to risk their lives to follow those orders. They supposedly saw a giant hole in the ice, large enough for ships to pass through. There was another testimony about hieroglyphic writing on the walls of a cave in Antarctica, which was also a military base. I am an avid lucid dreamer, and thought that this was all interesting. I decided to try visiting the place. Lo and behold, I found it. I entered into a chamber, and immediately recognized the writing as telling a Sumerian myth about a man riding a sky chariot, fighting a war. The sky chariot looked like a UFO jet ski with a crossbow mounted on the front. The writing itself was star writing. Basically, It's multi-dimensional astral writing that contains holographic information about the story. Hieroglyphs have a certain astral magic. I also saw the touch of an Arcturian communication for the writing, because I could see the telepathic shifting in it. Then, men came into the room and found me there. I, fearing them, fled through the wall. I certainly didn't want to be captured by government psychic spooks, or identified. I think it may be called Project Cerberus, a fitting name for the guardians of the underworld. My father told me that back in the 1970s, a few researchers were stationed there, and one of his buddies, a biochemist, was given the chance to fly out with them for a few months. The weirdest experience that he relates is that on the first night there, everyone was working well into the night, when there was a ringing noise coming from the exterior of their outpost, almost like the sound when you circle your finger around the rim of a wine glass, but if that was under the Doppler effect, so it's like a high-pitched note that dips and fades. The next second, the few researchers who were outside had come in through the front door and just waited by the entrance. I should point out that the exterior of the base was monitored by a single point man who relayed the outside conditions to the rest of the team at the very start of every briefing. This is the interaction that my father claims happened. Head researcher: seems a bit cold tonight. Point man: best to wait it out inside then. Yes, seemed to blow from the north. I'll pass it along. The point man would then leave the room, while the researchers remained inside to warm up. He would reappear 10 minutes later or so with the following: Point man: seems to have died down now. Head researcher: yes, we should continue. And then they would depart, back out into the howling wind. The odd thing was that the speech seemed so stilted and unnatural, almost as if it were rehearsed. Things got suspicious when the next day a similar event happened. Right after the unsettling noise was heard outside of the base, the researchers came back in and waited. This was their interaction this time. Head researcher: seems a bit cold tonight. Point man: best to wait it out inside then. Yes, seemed to blow in from the west. I will pass it along. They all waited for the point man to come back, while my father's biochemist friend was noting the similarity from the previous day. Sure enough, when the point man returned: Point man: seems to have died down now. Head researcher: yes, we should continue. This series of events continued for a week. Every single time, the noise would herald the arrival of the researchers, and each time they would exchange planned banter with the point man. It really didn't sit well with the biochemist. There was one noted change that he told my father about a month into working. The ringing noise seemed extremely close. The lights in the outpost even seemed to flicker as it hummed overhead. The door burst open immediately as 4 researchers practically stumbled over themselves, but they gained composure quickly. Head researcher: seems a bit cold tonight. Point man: best to wait it out inside then. Yes, seemed to blow in from overhead. I will pass it along. They all exchanged nervous glances as they waited for the point man to return. He did almost immediately. Point man: too cold to work tonight. Head researcher: yes, we should stop. After that night, they seemed to work in shorter shifts, and once the ringing noise stopped happening, the researchers stopped coming inside the base. When the Freedom of Information Act passed, the events that occurred at the outpost were all marked as destroyed for anyone attempting to research it. It was the only outpost that had its documents and public completely purged following this event. Operation High Jump. In 1947, Admiral Robert E. Byrd led an American expedition to Antarctica to supposedly establish the largest practical American presence possible on the continent. This is a fact. This operation did happen. What happened during the operation and what its intent was is up for debate. It involves 4,700 military personnel and the largest U.S. aircraft carrier at the time, the USS Philippines. After 8 weeks and many casualties, the U.S. forces retreated. Supposedly, they were attacked by saucer-shaped UFOs. Afterwards, Byrd did make a statement on the operation that the US needed to adopt countermeasures to deal with such flying vehicles that could maneuver at high speeds and travel from pole to pole. Rather than deny the heavy casualty reports, Admiral Byrd revealed in a press interview that Task Force 68 had encountered a new enemy that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Byrd was silenced from discussing the operation again. In 2006, declassified material from Joseph Stalin's KGB go over what the operation was really about, taken from Soviet spies embedded in the US government. The US sent a force to eliminate the Nazi base at New Swabia, Antarctica. They met fierce resistance from strange flying aircraft and suffered significant casualties. These reports were published in the Chilean press, where they force-docked after retreat. In the Soviet intelligence report, never-before-known testimony by 2 US Navy servicemen with Operation High Jump was revealed. A recent article in New Dawn by Frank Joseph gives a detailed analysis of the 2 eyewitness accounts, only the latter of which was mentioned in the 2006 Russian documentary. John P. Seswak, a radio man stationed on the USS Brownson, gave testimony of how UFOs appeared dramatically out of the ocean depths. On January 17, 1947, at 0700 hours, Seswak said, "I and my shipmates in the pilot house port side observed for several minutes the bright lights that ascended about 45 degrees into the sky very quickly. We could not ID the lights because our radar was limited to 250 miles in a straight line. Our real war of the worlds, over the next several weeks, according to the Soviet report, the UFOs flew close over the US naval flotilla, which fired on the UFOs, which did retaliate with deadly effects." According to Lieutenant John Sayerson, a flying boat pilot, the thing shot vertically out of the water at tremendous velocity, as though pursued by the devil, and flew between the masts of the ship at such a high speed that the radio antenna oscillated back and forth in its turbulence. An aircraft, Martin flying boat, from the Kurituk that took off just a few moments later, was struck with an unknown type of ray from the object and almost instantly crashed into the sea near our vessel. About 10 miles away, the torpedo boat Maddox burst into flames and began to sink. Having personally witnessed this attack by the object that flew out of the sea, all I can say is, it was frightening. It is known fact that Nazis actually did have an interest in establishing a base in Antarctica. It is a fact that they visited in 1938 and 1949, claiming the place New Swabia. German Admiral Donetz, the German submarine fleet, is proud of having built for the Führer, in another part of the world, a Shangri-La land, an impregnable fortress. Box of my dad's stuff in the attic contains a creepy picture. Okay, so my father was in the military and would often be stationed in Antarctica, of all places. When I was very young, I can vaguely remember going on a plane to Antarctica with my mother. I don't remember much about it, but I remember asking a man in a suit if we are going to where Santa lives. I clearly remember playing with a Christmas-themed train set in some playroom while being observed by people. I also remember I wanted to play in the snow, but not being allowed, and seeing a lot of men in Arctic camo, including my dad, with big guns and everything. When I was about 8 years old, my father died. I still don't know how he died. My mom used to always tell me she would explain when I'm older, and that's the kind of field that your father worked in. For the longest time, I figured he was in the military, so he must have died in combat and mostly forgot and got over it. I never saw him much anyway, so it was difficult to be sad about it, to be honest, but that does not make any sense. There weren't any conflicts in Antarctica ever. For reference, he died in 2005 and was definitely stationed in Antarctica at the time. I wish I asked my mom more about him now, because, well, a few months ago, my mom passed away too. Her old house was sold, and I was going through her stuff, looking for anything I wanted to keep. And in the attic, I found a box labeled Darren, Dad's name. Going through it, there was a lot of old records, military badges, photographs and such, but a few things creep me the fuck out, including pic related. So first of all, what the fuck is this? Actual photo of the pic and the back of it. I also found this photograph of myself playing with that exact same train set taken on Christmas of 1999. This would have been about the time I went to visit him with my mother. I have no idea why we even went out there to visit him. This whole situation is weird. This picture gave me the chills, man. You know how distant memories feel like dreams, almost unreal. Then I see this photo with the exact same train set I remember playing with, and it all feels too real. Last interesting picture that I found. It appears to be an old photograph of my dad when he was younger. I don't know if it's all relevant to this mystery, but here he is, in his younger days anyway. I'm not sure what any of this means, but I've read about some Antarctica-related conspiracies, and I'm just wondering if anything could be connected to this. Is it common knowledge that there was a military presence in Antarctica between at least 1995 and 2005? I thought the top could be some sort of encoded message. No idea what the marking at the bottom could mean though. Not very good with ciphers. Could it be a pigpen cipher? Sorry, what is cipher DS? Again, I'm shit at ciphers. It's something else I need to look into. Any help regarding the message on the back of the creepy picture would be greatly appreciated. So, if this is real, which it looks like it is, I'd say another species of human native to Antarctica. If you look at the features, it looks like a crossbreed between a Zeta reticuli and a white human male. Black eyes would indicate habitat possibly underground. Remember, gentlemen, when saving a picture that appears real, change the file name. I've had 2 pictures of real creatures remotely deleted. Not even kidding. It is an alien. There has been multiple experiences in Antarctica. One guy worked out there. Aliens killed some of his coworkers. He killed them and got away. He released his story, and he was found at home a week later, dead, with 2 bullets in his head, and it was said that he took his own life. Antarctica mystery and recent interest in the continent. The Atla reports are distilled summaries and changes of pretty much the sum total of English language written openly on the web. Bots trawl the web and look for trends in how humans choose their words. The idea behind the technology originated when the programmer, Cliff High, read about experiments at Pear. To give an example of how this works, if asked to describe the pitch's free-flow style, they might describe a red apple somewhat strangely as a bloody apple. If the next picture in the stream was of, for instance, a bloody corpse, or a lovely rock, if the next picture was of a child and mother showing affection. So, the assumption behind the technology is that people tend to subconsciously choose words that reflect future emotional states. The bots are programmed to pick up such emotional words and the words associated with them and track changes in them. The bigger the impact of an event on human emotions, the longer in advance our language will reflect their future state. And one of the biggest, longest standing sets of changes picked up by the bots concerns Antarctica. Can sum up my perception of what the bots are saying for you all, since I've read every webbot report and paid attention to this Antarctica stuff in them since early 2K. I will try to use as much of the actual webbot source language as possible in writing this, so you guys can look for these phrases and words in the news in the future. There is an ancient civilization underneath the ice. It's human, not alien. It's connected to the later Vedic Indus Valley civilization. The discovery, as it will be called, will push human history and civilization much further back in time, possibly as much as 500,000 years from modern humans, Homo sapiens, not first civilization. They were at least medically and philosophically very advanced. There are also indications that there will be technology found that surpasses our own, but not because it will be beyond our capacity. This tech is brand new, at an off angle to our own, a never thought of new branch of science for our current civilization. Words to describe it include new electrics, another major long-standing set, creeping electricity, time is energy, and field dynamics. Note, the same words also describe new technology coming from Mongolia, China, India, and specifically, new mathematics from Africa and Germany. So there might be a mix-up here where these two events, the discovery and new electric/math, happen in the same time frame. We will find actual books, presumably written in something like Proto-Sanskrit, and be able to read their own words. Their philosophy will have a profound, deep and long-lasting effect on humanity, described as giving back our self-confidence and positivity just in time for a challenge, period of climate change, economic turmoil, earth changes, and change in general. The new generation will embrace the mindset of these ancients in dealing with all of this chaos and launch huge projects to clean the ocean, cleanse the corrupt, invent new monetary system, and go to Mars. Later, more evidence of this civilization will be found in Ireland. Visual descriptors such as deep caves exposed by erosion and seaside cliffs hints to this being a natural library, or at least a store of documents. There is even descriptions of long deep stairs behind crumbling wall leads to chamber of books, which might reflect a future video or media published photo series fitting this description. Australia, caves exposed by major earthquake, adjacent to precious metal vein, mining. And India, cities underwater off coast. The discovery will catalyze major reformations of several major religions, in particular, the Abrahamic ones. Islam and Orthodox Judaism will be the most changed. The discovery will be the largest economic driver of the late 2020s, as artifacts, technology, etc. gives rise to something of a gold rush. People will be so desperate to see this with their own eyes that they will enlist in the military on the off chance that they will be posted to Antarctica. Also, evidence will be found that ice ages can happen much more quickly than we have previously believed, and these people who were possibly the ancestors of all of us ponder the scientific implications here were basically flash frozen, like so many of the frozen mammoths in Siberia found with fresh flowers in their stomachs. I bought a load of silver at about $15 in 2008 to 2009, and sold at $45+ in 2011, based on the WebBot reports, and as such, I am a believer in their at least occasional accuracy. I sincerely hope this is one of those occasions. Mongolia started a project/competition in 2015 called Power to Nomads. Basically, how do you electrify a country where most of the population spends their life on horseback? They are looking for an energy source small enough to carry by pack animal, but powerful enough to power a home, or ideally, several homes. This perfectly fits the language describing the new energy source, and right now, inventors and engineers all over Mongolia are trying to invent it. Note, it's not free energy, it's energy minus cost of building and maintenance. Something that generates a constant amount of power from the moment it leaves the factory and for 10+ years, at which point you need to buy a new one. It is forecast to cause major changes in where humanity chooses to live, and a strong driving force for a more decentralized humanity. Off-grid becomes easy. This new electrics apparently needs one of the 2 stable isotopes of silver to function, which will make silver reach $600 an ounce at some point in the future. I have a strong track record so far for my current rank, and I am at the top position in my field. Any specific type of phenomena that you know of to focus on that they are currently involved with, buzzwords only, I can figure out the rest. Would people who work in your field know your name? Yes. Also, I am working with people now that are doing experiments to measure and prove some things we all work on. In short, the major players in my field want to collaborate with the people at the place I am now at. You have a box which is made of something that you don't know what it is. In this case, we need a mass spec or X-ray diffraction apparatus. Mass spec is common. X-rays need large facility. That's assuming you can even get a sample of the box. In short, mass spec is common. X-ray needs national lab or black budget military. I know people involved with both, not black budget. Determination of the inside of the box would need a wide range of frequencies, from soft X-ray to radio waves, so that brings it back to in-lab equipment. Either way, I would say materials science department. It's producing power/energy, but you don't know how. Good. Then we need to connect different machines/sinks which require different power to operate and see how it responds, i.e., what is the maximum and minimum power output of the box? Is the output constant, etc. This sounds more engineering side, Lockheed, wind tunnel type facility, or maybe a materials characterization lab. We need to hook it up to a bunch of things, essentially. It is producing signals that you don't know how to interpret. Fourier analysis, radiation spectrum, thermal emission, acoustical emission, all as a function of power output. This may require larger facilities, depending on the output. I would look at specifically correlations between signals produced versus power output. This would require something like material science, electric engineering, maybe some particle physics for detectors. This is assuming macroscopic size. If on chip, then maybe we need to look into plasmonics. Again, this is EE, materials, condensed matter, solid state.